This video is an analysis of the contracts question from the February 1996 bar. I will read you the question because it's short, and then we will go through the analysis. The question reads as follows. On June the 1st, 1994, owner signed a contract with Ace Painting to paint the exterior of owner's home by September the 1st, 1994. Same year, 3 months to do the job, for a contract price of $4,700. On July the 1st, that's about a month later, owner called Ace by telephone and told Ace that it was particularly important for the house to be painted by September the 1st because his employer had transferred him and he was putting the house up for sale. Okay. New paragraph. The weather was unusually rainy, not an unprecedented storm, just unusually rainy, and Ace fell behind on all of its painting jobs. Ace could have hired additional painters or subcontracted out some of the jobs to stay on schedule, but Ace would have lost money on several jobs. Ace did not finish painting owner's house until September the 20th. As a consequence, owner did not list the house for sale until September the 21st. New paragraph. The house stood empty, and owners made no effort to rent or otherwise make use of it until it was finally sold in May of 1995. Most realtors in the area agree and would testify that the selling season in the area runs from May until October the 1st, and that owner's house would have been more likely to be sold in 1994 if it had been painted and ready to show on September the 1st. New paragraph. Owner has refused to pay Ace for the work. Ace has sued owner for $4,700. Owner denies liability and counterclaims against Ace for $6,000, asserting that the delay in Ace's completion was the cause of his missing the selling season. The interest payments on the mortgage on owner's house from October 94 to May of 95 totaled $6,000. New paragraph. What claims and defenses may owner and Ace reasonably assert against each other, and what is the likely success of each? We begin with the suit of Ace versus owner. Now, Ace will sue owner for the $4,700 because, after all, it is now May of the following year. Ace has finished the painting job, and Ace has not been paid. So Ace wants to sue owner for the $4,700. In order for Ace to prevail on that contract, Ace needs to show several things. Ace needs to show, number one, that a contract was formed. Number two, that Ace breached it, owner breached it, and that Ace was damaged by whatever amount he was damaged to try to collect those damages. Now, in this case, we have one more factor in there, because not only does Ace need to show, Ace will claim the contract was formed, but the owner will say that the contract was modified. The owner will say the contract was modified, and so that that time was of the essence. That originally the completion date was September the 1st, but it was an ordinary completion date. And if you have a contract, service contract, completion date is September the 1st, and you finish late, well, that's a minor breach. And what happens is the owner, you have substantially performed because you finished a little bit late, and the owner gets damages for whatever damages were foreseeable, actual, causal, foreseeable, and unavoidable, for the few days late, whatever damages were caused by the few days late performance. So the Ace painter would get the full contract price minus the damages caused by the minor breach. On the other hand, if time was of the essence And owner tried to make time of the essence. Owner tried to modify the contract so that time was of the essence. If that modification was successful and ACE did not finish on time, then that's a material breach. When time is of the essence and you finish late, that's a material breach. And in a case of material breach, ACE cannot even sue for breach of contract because ACE is the breaching party. In that case, ACE would get quasi-contract for the work done. So we begin with the suit of ACE versus owner, and what will we do? First we begin, ACE has to show a contract was formed. That's not a problem because according to the facts, it was given. And you need to point out to the bar examiners that this was a common law contract, not a UCC contract, because it is a contract for services. This contract, we are told, was in writing. However, it does not need to be in writing because it is a contract for services. The $500 rule applies to contracts for the sale of goods, not contracts for services. And by the way, that rule is still $500. It is not yet $5,000. The American Law Institute adopted $5,000 as the new number that should be used for UCC. However, the mere fact that they did that for the UCC, each state still has to adopt each provision of the UCC to become a statute in that state. And as of the time that I'm speaking to you right now, no state has adopted the $5,000 rule, so it's still $500. And as states may gradually begin to adopt it, and it will change slowly. So right now, we know a contract was formed because they told us. We know it's a common law contract. We know it's in writing. It doesn't need to be in writing. Was the contract modified? The the owner will claim that the contract was modified. And since it was modified, time was of the essence. And when ACE did not finish on September the 1st, that was a material breach. Whereas ACE will say, no, the contract was not modified. So what we have to do is to look at the rules for modification and make a decision. What are the rules for modification? There are 3 requirements for the modification of a contract. Number 1, the parties must agree on the new terms. Number 2, we have to deal with the consideration problem, and I'll give you more detail about that. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. And we look for defenses to the modification. The defenses to the modification are exactly the same as the defenses to forming a contract. Fraud, statute of frauds, duress, unconscionability, lack of capacity, and so forth. The statute of frauds has a slightly different meaning when you're talking about whether or not the modification needs to be in writing. The rule regarding the statute of frauds for modifications is that if the contract as modified would be subject to, if the contract as modified would have required a writing if you had started there. If the contract as modified would have required a writing if you had started there, then the modification needs to be in writing. So if I'm selling you a car for $300 and I paint it and I'm now selling it to you for $800, we modified, that needs to be in writing for the reasons that I mentioned. On the other hand, if I'm selling you the car for $800 and I have an accident and now you're going to buy it for $300, that modification does not need to be in writing because the place where you ended up would not have needed a writing to begin with. Here, the contract for the doesn't need to be in writing because it's a service contract, doesn't matter how much it is, doesn't need to be in writing, and therefore we do not have a statute of frauds defense. Therefore, the question then again is, was the modification effective? We need to know that. These are the 3 requirements for modification. Number 1, agreement on the new terms. Did the parties agree on the new terms? Well, let's look at what happened. According to the facts, what happened is that on July 1st, this is 1 month after the original contract, owner called ACE by telephone, so he knows no writing, and told ACE that it was particularly important that the house be painted by September the 1st because his employer had transferred him and he was putting the house up for sale. Well, that's what owner said to Ace. Well, the parties have to agree on the new terms. We don't know what Ace said. Ace remained silent. And is that going to be treated as Ace agreeing to the new terms? Well, let's take a look at this agreement by this acceptance by silence. In general, the rules regarding acceptance by silence are here. Now, and the same rules would apply to a modification, agreement to the modification by silence. I propose a modification to you, and you don't say anything. Is that modification agreed on by silence or not? Use the same rules. Agreement by silence. There's the common law rule says no. Silence is not an agreement, and that's the end of it. Number two, the restatement 69A and 69B have something to say about it, because you can produce some very unfair results here by this blanket rule that silence is never an acceptance. It's too broad. The restatement says there are some situations where silence can be an acceptance. One, if you have received services and had, not goods, services, and had an opportunity to reject them, and the offeree knows that payment is expected, then even though the person remains silent, they receive the services, had an opportunity to reject them, and know that payment is expected, that's an acceptance, even though nothing was said. Second situation, acceptance by silence. Again, for modifications by silence, you apply the same rule. If the offeror leads the offeree to believe that silence will be an acceptance, you say to the person, I offer you this contract, or I propose to modify the contract, and if I don't hear an objection from you, then I will assume that you have accepted the modification. And so now I've told you that silence is okay with me, and silence means acceptance. But the only time that works, we got another element to that. Number one, I have to lead you to believe that silence will be an acceptance, and my example does that. So if I lead you to believe that silence will be an acceptance, and the second requirement right here is that the offeree must subjectively intend to accept. Subjectively intend to accept. So I make that proposal to you that I just made a minute ago, and if you say nothing, then are you bound? It depends on whether you subjectively intended to accept. It's an unusual rule, doesn't follow the normal objective theory of contracts, but I created this problem by sort of saying to you, I will assume that you accept if I don't hear from you. And that's creating the problem. If I create the problem, I'm stuck with the solution, and this is the solution. If I lead you to believe that silence is acceptance, and you subjectively, when the dispute comes up later on, you subjectively intended to accept, then it's fine. Situations where you see that happening, where it works, is I offer to modify the insurance policy. You're a lawyer and you're practicing and you want to increase your malpractice insurance, and I say to you, I offer to increase your malpractice insurance from $1 million to $2 million, and if I don't hear from you immediately, I will assume that you have accepted. Okay. Now something happens and you get sued, and you want that extra $1 million of coverage, and you would say, yes, I subjectively intended to accept, and it would work. Okay. That's what this is about. Two other situations where silence may be an acceptance: prior conduct, where the people have conducted themselves so that they regularly have used silence as an acceptance. And in this case, the deal is that if our relationship is such that silence is acceptance, we've been dealing with each other right along, and it's such that applying objective standards, that a reasonable person in my position would expect you to object if you don't want whatever I'm doing. And when you don't object, then I assume that you're agreeing to it. So if our prior conduct is such that a reasonable person in the offeror's position would believe that you will let me know if you object, because our prior conduct has been what it's been, that's a situation where silence will be an acceptance. And the final case is dominion over goods. If you give me the goods and you ship me some goods by mail, and I didn't ask for them, and you shipped them, well, forgetting about the consumer laws nowadays. Nowadays, the consumer laws is such that you can just throw them away if you want to. But using the common law only, if you ship to me and I didn't ask for it, then if I start giving them away to other people or selling them to other people, that's exercising so much dominion over that property that it will be treated as an acceptance. On the other hand, if I stick them aside someplace and say I don't want them, or even throw them away, say I don't want them, then that probably then I have not exercised so much dominion over the goods. If you shipped them to me and I just put them aside, said I don't want them, you can come get them if you want to. That's not exercising excessive dominion. But if I give them away or sell them, then it is. In that case, my silence will be treated as acceptance. So these are the cases where silence is an acceptance. And if we now go back to our problem, in this case, owner said to Ace that the time is now of the essence. Did Ace agree to that? Ace said nothing. We don't have any of those exceptional situations. Therefore, we do not have an acceptance from Ace to this new proposal. So we do not have an agreement on the new terms. Therefore, I think the modification really did not happen. Owner attempted to modify, but the modification failed. Consideration. Under the common law, you had to provide consideration for modification, and none was provided here. So under the old common law, that's another reason that the modification would fail. Under the modern common law, you need to provide consideration only if the modification is, you do not need to provide consideration, pardon me, you do not need to provide consideration if the modification is based on unforeseeable circumstances and it was in good faith. Well, in this case, this person didn't know that the employer was going to transfer him someplace else, so arguably, owner has encountered unforeseeable circumstances and is certainly acting in good faith by saying, I want to sell my house, and I want to sell, and I need it finished by September the 1st, because I got to move. So under the modern common law, you will not need consideration. This is not a UCC problem, but if it were a UCC problem, the UCC says you do not need consideration for a modification. That UCC provision is at 2-209 subsection 1. You do not need consideration for a modification, but be careful, this is not a UCC contract. Finally, defenses to the modification. These are the defenses, same defenses as the defenses to formation of a contract, and none of these happened. And you don't need the writing for the reasons I mentioned earlier. So what we have is we have a contract. We probably do not have an effective modification because they didn't agree on the terms of the modification, because silence would not be an acceptance, because all those exceptional situations we mentioned did not happen. Should you write those on the bar exam in your answer? The answer is yeah. That if you briefly, why silence is not an acceptance, if you could summarize those, you would get more points for it, no question about it. So we have formed a contract, the modification was attempted, it probably failed. Now we come to the breach of contract. Breach of contract. Breach of contract has these requirements. All conditions precedent to the person's duty to perform. In our case, we're talking specifically about owner paying Ace. All conditions precedent to owner paying Ace have either occurred or been excused. Well, Ace will say the condition precedent occurred, but it didn't, because he was supposed to finish by September the 1st. And when he didn't finish by September the 1st, the condition did not occur. But the condition is excused by substantial performance. Because he finished 20 days late, that's substantial performance. Now this substantial performance doctrine gets tested a lot. And let's take a quick look here at how you deal with it. Substantial performance, at common law, the rule is that the question is, did the non-breaching party receive the substantial benefit of its bargain? Did they receive the substantial benefit of the bargain? Now, that's a common law rule, and you just have to make arguments about what is the substantial benefit of the bargain and reach your conclusion. You'll get more points, you can do this, but you'll get more points if you can use the factors in the restatement. The second restatement, section 241, has these 6 factors that to help you decide whether or not there has been substantial performance. Number 1, first factor, remember these are factors now, these are not requirements. When you have factors as opposed to requirements, the factors are you don't have to have them all. Requirements, you got to have them all. But factors are just things that you take into account in trying to make a decision. So here we have these 6 factors and you use to decide whether or not there has been substantial performance. First factor, the extent to which the loss of the essence of the bargain has occurred. In other words, whatever the core of the bargain was, this person didn't quite finish. Have they deprived the person of the core of the bargain? For example, I am building a house for you, and I finished everything except, the garage door isn't finished. And now, for some reason, I don't finish the garage door. Certainly, substantial performance has occurred there. You've got the substantial benefit of the bargain. So how much is the person deprived of the benefit of that bargain by this incompleteness? Will the damages adequately compensate the victim? How much was actually done? In the case of my garage door, almost everything. The likelihood of cure, that's self-explanatory. How willful was the breach? If I didn't finish, was it willful or not? That's important. And finally, the impact of the delay. If I don't put the garage door on and you have to wait a while to get it later, how much of an impact will that have? Well, in my garage door case, would not have very much of an impact. So these are factors. I would memorize these factors, because if you have a contracts question, the possibility of substantial performance being tested is very high. It's tested very often. So we learn these. Here, getting back to our problem, you can see, you can make a good case for the fact that Ace Painting substantially performed. They were only 20 days late. First requirement for breach, have all conditions preceding to owner's duty to pay either occurred or been excused? Yes, they've been excused. But when conditions preceding are excused in this way by substantial performance, when a condition preceding is excused by substantial performance, please keep in mind that this always means that there was a minor breach. There's a minor breach because if I am building the house for you and I finish everything except the garage door, there's a minor breach. And so what you pay me in that case is the contract price for building the house minus what it's going to cost you to get someone to finish the garage door. So you sue me for damages for the minor breach, and that's what you get. Substantial performance, you don't even have to sue me. What you do is, if I have only substantially performed, the amount of money that you owe me is the contract price minus the damages caused by the minor breach. Time for performance, has the time for owner to pay arrived? Yes, the work has been completed. And the duty to pay has not been discharged? No, the duty to pay has not been discharged. This doesn't belong here. The duty to pay, this, sorry. So the duty to pay has not been discharged. So therefore, we have the breach by ACE. What is owner entitled to? Owner is entitled to $4,700 minus the damages for the minor breach. The minor breach is the 20 days late, so the owner is entitled to $4,700 minus damages for late performance. Now, next, ACE is going to sue. ACE is in the problem. Owner is going to sue ACE. And when owner sues ACE, owner will say, ACE, you breached. And now ACE is going to say, no, 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 I did not breach. ACE is going to say, I finished the job. I didn't breach. Because ACE will say, I didn't breach because I was because I couldn't finish by September the 1st because of impossibility. We had unusual rains, I got behind, I couldn't help it, that's why I didn't finish on time, and my duty to finish on time is discharged by that impossibility. And so ACE will say, I didn't breach, the 20 days late was not a breach because my duty to finish on time was discharged by impossibility, all the rains. And the answer to that is that the impossibility needs to be objective impossibility, not subjective. And it was possible for ACE to finish. The facts tell you that ACE could have hired some other people to come in to help with the work. So we do not have objective impossibility, therefore the impossibility will not work, and ACE did breach. Was ACE's breach the actual cause of the $6,000 loss? Well, owner will say, ACE, if you had finished on September the 1st, I would have put my house up for sale, and the selling season ends in October, and I would have had a month to sell it. Well, would the owner have sold the house during that 1 month or not? And the answer is we don't know. So you should say something like that the ACE not finishing by September the 1st was at least a substantial factor in whether or not owner would have sold the house. But you can't put a but for here. Next, the damages that owner is entitled to. We know that ACE breached. The damages are those which were foreseeable when the contract was modified. Normally under Hadley versus Baxendale, damages are the damages that you can collect are the ones which are foreseeable when the contract was formed. But in this case, we modified the contract, and at the time of the modification of the contract, the painter, should the painter have foreseen that if I don't finish by September the 1st, this person may not be able to sell their house. Remember that ACE Painting didn't even know the house was going to be sold. He thought I was just going to paint the house and a person was going to live in it. That was what he thought in June. But in July, ACE realized that that the house was going to be sold, and sure should ACE have foreseen in July that if I don't finish by September the 1st, the person won't be able to sell their house. Well, that's debatable, so you give some discussion about that. You know, after all, painter works in the area. We don't know that painter lives there. So the painter would probably be aware of the fact that the selling season ends on October the 1st, so arguably should have known that. On the other hand, we don't think the modification was effective anyway. So the foreseeable when the contract was modified, the contract wasn't modified. So the damage would have to be foreseeable when the contract was formed on June the 1st. And the house wasn't even going to be sold at that time. So this is going to end up being no, the damage of not being able to sell the house was not foreseeable when the contract was formed. If the contract was modified, which we doubt, then it would have to be foreseeable when the contract was modified, and that's debatable. Finally, there's owner is suing ACE. Owner has a duty to mitigate, and owner did not mitigate. It's obvious that owner didn't try to use the property. One more issue in this problem, and that is the quasi-contract issue right here. If the contract was modified, and we don't think the modification was effective. But if the modification was effective, then time was of the essence. And if time was of the essence, then when ACE did not finish on September the 1st, that was a material breach. And since ACE is now the material breacher, ACE cannot sue for breach of contract. ACE has to sue for quasi-contract for the value of services rendered. And that goes up here under the suit of ACE versus owner, because ACE would sue owner quasi-contract right here. Those are the issues. Please, when you write these analyses, please keep in mind, do it by rule application. Don't just kind of generally discuss the problem. Rule application is what we want. Was the contract modified? Rule. Modification requires A, B, C. Application. Go through and show that there was no agreement, on the modified terms, that silence is not an agreement, and you go, if you know it, you can go through those examples where there are some cases where silence is an agreement, amounts to an acceptance, and we don't have it here, so silence was not an acceptance, therefore the contract was not modified. And that is the end of this analysis of this question.